not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how you doing?
Good, Dan. It does feel more normal than it did once, and I've so far avoided going out with a muzzle on to the shops. How about yourself?
Yeah, feeling similar. Not made it to the gym as yet today. As they've reopened, but yeah, I've not been to the shops either. So maybe steering clear of those, I think. So, Mike, what have we got to discuss today?
Well, first of all, a rare victory for free speech. Then talking about Brexit and the Russia report. Talking about how it was warmer in Roman times and how global warming might not be all it's made out to be. Plans from Boris to bring about a watershed for junk food adverts, and our usual roundup of things to do to stay busy.
Yes, indeed, a rare victory for free speech has occurred recently. A gentleman by the name of Nick Buckley, an MBE no less, was fired as the CEO of a charity by the name of Mancunian Way. This was a charity that he had set up himself. He was fired fired by the trustees after a petition was raised demanding his removal from the post after he had posted an article on LinkedIn that was a little bit critical of the Black Lives Matter, the organisation's manifesto. The recently formed Free Speech Union came to the rescue and raised money for a top solicitor who specialises in trusts and charity work. And he found various irregularities in the actions of the trustees. Therefore, the trustees have now resigned and been replaced, and Mr. Buckley is now back as the CEO. Amazing work by the Free Speech Union there, Mike.
It is. It's a union, unlike so many others, that actually works there to protect its members and has really taken up a very important cause there, which is great to see. You mentioned there about he was critical of the Black Lives Matter organisation manifesto, and when you read some of what he wrote, he was quite clear to distance himself or to differentiate, should I say, between the protests about the killing of George Floyd, the protest movement, but actually talk about some of what's on the manifesto. And you know, either we are all in favour of getting rid of the nuclear family, capitalism, and a whole bunch of other things that organisation stands for, or maybe we're not. We don't have to sign up to all of that, and that's pretty mild-mannered criticism. That for a man that's done such a huge amount to set up a really important charity, ridiculous that people lose their jobs ever over kind of expressing a political view. Particularly something like this, perfectly reasonable stuff he was saying, and fantastic that the Free Speech Union be able to get him back there.
Absolutely, and the Free Speech Union is a pretty recent development set up by Toby Young, I understand, and I think you don't have to be a journalist or whatever to join. I think it's I want to say it's £50 a year for most people, most individuals. Although I think there's probably a student discount. And they will help you if you ever get into bother, because you're being targeted really, or by the cancellation culture, just of people who just simply disagree with you when you haven't actually said anything that outrageous or something that wasn't that outrageous just a week before. So really good to see that they're having some really good success early on in their existence, and certainly an organisation that I think we should all certainly support and look to see how they develop in future.
Absolutely.
Well, this week we've seen the release of the Russia report. This is a report from Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee on Russian influence in the UK. Now then, since the election of Donald Trump and some suggestions that he was in cahoots with Vladimir Putin and some suggestions about getting the dirt on Hillary Clinton, the UK media and certain politicians have been quite obsessed about the Russians' attempts apparently to influence the outcome of the 2016 EU referendum. Well, was there a smoking gun? Well, the report says a few things. It says that Russian influence in the UK is the new normal. That's a disturbing phrase, isn't it, really? They are critical of successive governments and charities and trusts and financial institutions for basically working with Russians without actually looking into their background. Various aspects of academia as well have come under criticism in the report. And they want the government to have greater powers and to look into these things, more transparency, that sort of thing. And apparently, and I hadn't twigged this, but members of the House of Lords don't actually have to register their outside payments in the same way that MPs do. I mean, I suppose they're probably quite free to have jobs part-time or full-time, so maybe that's why they don't have to do it. But they're suggesting that should be the case. And they say that the UK is clearly a target for Russian disinformation. However, they say there's no evidence of any Russian disinformation, etc., having any influence on the outcome of the 2016 EU referendum. But they are convinced that the Russians did try to influence the outcome of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. So, Mike, it wasn't the Russians what done it.
Sorry, Dan, I've got a bit distracted there. Do you want to redo that? I've been so busy counting my rubles. So Russians, yeah, no, I don't know. Never had any influence from them at all. I mean, it's been a desperate attempt all the way along the line from people that cannot accept the democratic outcome of the 2014 referendum, 2016 referendum even, although we might come on to the 2014 one. The 2016 referendum, people that can't accept it just need to find any excuse they can for finding out that they're in the minority. You know, the report is pretty damning for the intelligence services, but for those that seem to believe that the British people really do want to be part of a country called Europe. No, it's very good news, and it's the last of those things that I can think of from the economy is going to crash if we vote to leave, to the electoral commission attacks on the leave groups, now to it's the Russians what done it, that's kind of finally broken. And after the UKIP win in the European elections in 2014, the Cameron win in 2015 committing to a referendum, the referendum win, the 2017 election win for parties voting committing to leave, the 2019 European elections win for the Brexit Party, and then Boris's win in 2019. Finally, there's some people in that remote minority that might just actually get it.
Well, yeah, I mean they tried to present us as the crazies, but really it was they that were the conspiracy theorists. So unprepared to accept the result that they had to dream up these ideas of Russian, influence, and thinking people are so stupid that they saw one thing on Facebook and that made them vote a particular way. And I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't remember seeing any rubles whatsoever in the several months that we were involved in the Leave campaign in Croydon. I seem to certainly no rubles hit my bank account.
Absolutely. I mean, we'd have loved to have had some help from anyone, frankly. And if they wanted to help us pay for events, that would have been ideal. I regularly speak on Sputnik Radio, and I'm, completely open to the prospect of them paying me to do that. I have to say it's entirely voluntary at the moment, and I enjoy doing it. I'm not, not expecting any payment, but wouldn't refuse it. No, it's and it is this point of it's people that can't understand that good people can differ. good people can differ. People who are totally logical and sensible and have many of the same views as you, many of much the same background, live in your street, can have different political views, can view constitutional matters differently. It shouldn't be hard to accept. There was some stuff that came out after the referendum about how the country voted, and sort of to summarise some of it, it was almost the case of saying that almost everywhere in the country voted sort of 55-45 to leave, apart from a few super Remain places, which voted very, very high numbers to remain. Now, that's not quite true because there were some big leave areas, Sunderland being sort of famous one for that. But most of the country voted sort of quite substantially to leave, but there were some super Remain areas. And I have a suspicion that some of this constant unwillingness and inability to accept that people vote the other way are people that come from those super Remain areas or work in those super Remain industries, teaching, higher education, the media, that they simply don't come into contact with people that voted to leave in the same way that you and I come into contact with people that voted to remain, voted to leave, didn't vote, and every other possible option pretty much every day.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that you are occasionally on Sputnik Radio. Of course, Alex Salmond, I believe, ended up with a show on Russia Today. So interesting to see that the Scottish independence referendum is referenced in this report. SNP could be in a spot of bother now.
Yes, it's funny how the SNP, an organisation that doesn't seem to want to accept any referendum result, doesn't very, very quick to criticise anything to do with Brexit. Very happy to accept the notion that there was Russian interference and that's what done it. Now find themselves very much accused of that from the Scottish referendum. And it's not surprising that foreign powers try to interfere with elections. Let's be honest, we've been doing it for years around the world. The CIA are absolute past masters at it, and not probably just past masters. You can influence referendums. Of course, just going back to the EU referendum, Barack Obama came over here directly to influence that referendum. And I remember the Saturday in Croydon, the weekend after that had happened, frankly, a queue of people coming to say, so I wasn't really sure how I wanted to vote, but now I've been told how I have to vote by a foreign leader, I'm definitely voting leave. Because people were incensed that a US president would come over and tell us how to vote. I suspect some of that might happen if it was ever clear the Russians got involved, but people being put off by it. But yeah, Scotland, it's not a shock. It's probably a relatively easy referendum to influence because the numbers of people involved are that much smaller. But ultimately, they're still part of the UK. It was a once in a generation vote, and maybe by 20 years from now, or whenever another referendum's held, we'll have better defences.
Absolutely. Interesting times in this, a very interesting report. On the Croydon Constitutionalist website, we list a few things that we would believe in, and one of those is rational science, not climate alarmism. And the Global Warming Policy Forum have issued a couple of reports just recently that make very, very interesting reading. Mike, why don't you take the listeners through a couple of them?
Yes, certainly. So the Global Warming Policy Forum have recently released a report on the Russian warm period. Got Russians on the brain here. Roman warm period, stating that a new study's come out that says that the Roman warm period was 2 degrees Celsius warmer than it is today. Now, we've brought this out before in various items we've mentioned on our website, how the medieval warming period resulted in the rise of the Vikings, how the Romans grew grapes at Hadrian's Wall. Something you couldn't do today. It was clearly warmer during the Roman time than it is today. Now, we don't have great measures, but now they do have a measure. And they were looking specifically at the temperature of the Mediterranean Sea. And it says here it's 2 degrees Celsius hotter during the Roman Empire than in the average temperatures at the time. So there's a 500-year period from about 1 AD to 500 AD, and that's the cutover from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, where it was warmer on the Mediterranean Sea. They've measured some of the skeletal remains there, and so the question is, why has that happened, and what might that have an effect for today? Obviously, it wasn't the supercharged chariots doing it. It was unlikely to be the coal burning that was a factor in those massive Roman power stations. It wasn't just the aqueduct, it was the national grid. No, it was sunspots, it was solar activity. They conclude. Now, it's funny how previous warming periods are to do with natural effects, but current warming periods are always man-made and means we need to tax people more. But interesting article, worth having a little read on. Which brings us up to something else, of course. This week, our friends at the BBC, and I use that term lightly, highlighted a report about climate change and the fact that polar bears could be lost by 2100. It states in there that the current rate of climate change, the findings match previous projections that polar bears are likely to persist to 2100, only in a few small populations very far north if climate change continues unabated. This same article has links to other articles on the BBC website that include the fact that polar bears are running out of food and polar bears fail to adapt to the lack of food in the warmer Arctic. That's clearly a view put by the BBC. Now, is that accurate? Is that true? Could the BBC be unrealistic in some of this? Well, again, if you go back to the Global Warming Policy Forum, they point out that this scenario assumes an unrealistic 500% increase in coal and a 6-degree rise in global temperature by 2100. And they make a number of points on the factors they've used to produce this expectation the polar bears might die out as being completely unreasonable and beyond just extreme. But it's more than that, and it's something completely failed to mention by the BBC. Many of us will be used to hearing that polar bears are going to die out for a number of years now. Since I think Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth film. But of course, since that time, polar bear numbers have increased by a whopping 30%. Not mentioned in the BBC article, rarely ever not mentioned by this study. Polar bear numbers are on the rise. So when they say polar bears aren't adapting to a warmer climate and they're running out of food, well, they must be doing something right. They've gone up in numbers. And yeah, just a complete wrong spin put on things. You won't find much about the Roman warm period on the BBC website, or at least certainly I couldn't find much about it. There's a lot of stories out there about global warming, but it's worth digging a bit deeper, sometimes on our site. And if you see anything, let us know. Well, they're not always as true as they make out.
Well, yeah, I mean, the BBC and other organisations, they love a story about polar bears, don't they? And they particularly love to show you a picture of a polar bear clinging on to a tiny bit of ice with water around it, as if like all the ice is melting and the polar bear is going to drown, soon enough. They're all going to die out. Why they keep using those sort of pictures is beyond me, because polar bears can swim. I mean, they've obviously swam to that piece of ice. It didn't just break off, and they've got, they've nodded off or something, and it's broken off. But it's really sort of emotive video or emotive pictures there that they like to use to spread this message that the polar bears are all dying out, and we're all gonna get too hot, and we're all gonna die out in 100 years or whatever. You've got to stop driving cars, etc., all because of this global warming idea. Well, whether it's happening or not, it's important to read more widely than the BBC, and the Global Warming Policy Forum certainly has some interesting articles on there, so highly recommend it. Well, we've got Boris Johnson with an imminent announcement. Whilst Boris has been talking for some time about not being in favour of sin taxes, so for example, extra taxes on sugary drinks and the like, apparently there's going to be an announcement from the government that they're going to introduce a watershed for the advertising of fatty foods. So rather like sex and violence on ITV or the Channel 4 or whatever, you can't have it on the TV until 9 o'clock. Apparently, it looks as if this has been brought about because of the link between COVID-19 deaths and people who are obese. Mike, does Boris know best?
These people in government with the obsessive need to interfere with our lives is something we absolutely have to push back on at every opportunity. People generally know what's good and what's bad for them. That doesn't necessarily mean they always follow the advice. Life would be very boring if we followed the advice of only doing what's good for us. But no, Boris doesn't know best. He doesn't know what's right for every person in every circumstance. And at a time when the economy has fallen off a cliff through action by this government, now maybe it was action they didn't have a lot of choice about, but nonetheless their action, don't start making it harder for businesses to make a buck. Now is absolutely the worst time economically to start interfering in that way. And again, do we think that because there's an advert for a donut at 7 p.m. is going to really make a difference to people's weight as opposed to it being on at 10 p.m.? I mean, how stupid do they think we are that that's the big difference? What's an unreasonable position for a government to take? But it does go beyond that. There's certainly an interesting article on the Guido Fawkes website pointing out some of the places that Conservative MPs have been advertising unhealthy food. And good, they're actually generally what they're doing is advertising local businesses. Good on them. Exactly what you want your MP to do in that sort of circumstance. But now it's just a hypocrisy. I can't even work out what the thinking is behind it, Dan, with this watershed nonsense. Can you?
Not really. I mean, who do they think? Well, who do they think is not able to watch television until 9 o'clock in the evening? Would it have to be small children? And also, and I don't. We've not seen the actual announcement yet, so we don't know the details. But don't kids use the internet? I don't think they actually sit there watching standard linear television very much anymore. So you can ban all the adverts you want off the television. Good luck banning adverts on YouTube and other social media outlets. How are they going to do that? It's both patronising, paternalistic, just ridiculous nanny statism as far as I'm concerned, but also won't even, not only will it not achieve the actual goal, it won't even work at all because technologically it's an irrelevancy now. I don't really watch that much television anymore. And am I the market they're aimed at, or are they only aiming this at, I don't know, children who don't use the internet and have to watch television? Because if it's after 9 o'clock, well, that's when the adults watch television, is it? So I just don't see any of the logic in this. Now, it's not official yet, but it's very much being mooted. So we'll have to see the actual details of it. But I just don't see it working at all. And that's just, is it another piece of legislation which doesn't have any effect, but is more virtue signaling or more trying to push people in a certain direction, but with no real hope of it actually working? We talked last week about the face masks in shops. Is the reason for that just to persuade more people to go back into the shops to try to get the high street back up and running? But it may, of course, have negative effects there. But it won't actually help too much in terms of, from a scientific perspective, in terms of stopping the spread of COVID. This again just seems to me like more paternalistic measures and with no hope of working.
Absolutely. You mentioned there is this aimed at children that don't watch the internet. What really terrifies me is it's aimed at adults. They actually think that they get to tell us as law-abiding, tax-paying citizens of this country frankly, their masters, that we have to do as they tell us. That's bad enough as a concept at any time. It's at a time when the government has taken unprecedented powers to control how we act and behave. And look, I understand why they've done that for the pandemic. To then say, well, we've given you some free, we won't let you go out to a restaurant. I know these things are a bit more open now, but half the year we've not let you go out to a restaurant or to a pub or to the gym or even for longer than an hour a day or whatever else it might be. But you were sitting at home eating biscuits. Tut, tut, tut. We're going to have to stop that. Where does that end? That is a totalitarian view. And yes, it's only adverts. But it was only adverts when they started with smoking as well. It's a pouring down. But your point about people watching live TV, I watched some live TV for the first time, I think, in a year or more, when the football came back on. And I say live TV in my home there. I will go out to a bar and watch some football now. Since the bars have been open, I never put the telly on. It's all except unless it's Netflix sort of thing. It's not a thing, and I don't think I'm so unusual in that sense anymore. Yeah, it's just, who the hell do these people think they are, trying to tell and dictate every measure of our lives?
Well, Mike, we've got another couple of interesting articles up on our website. Why don't you talk the listeners through those?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you to our regular contributor, Josh Asloff, who's written about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency and blockchain, and talking about the potential future for money. Another great article, really interesting around what that means for money, and lots of people have heard about Bitcoin recently. Well, it's a great way of finding a bit more about that. Just a quick quote from it. And particularly this points to how governments have got involved in money, which never used to be the case. So sadly, we went down the very damning path by nationalising money and giving full control over the monetary sphere to governments and central banks. We took what was once a bottom-up process based on market democracy and turned it into a top-down process based in institutional cartel-like tyranny. Have a read of that. Some interesting stuff about money and about Bitcoin. Also, we've got a great interview with Sophia, the Brighton group leader of the Libertarian Party. So she's a fairly young leader, recently left university, out of Brighton, written about what it's like to run the group in Brighton, some points there. So a couple of quick quotes from that. Brighton has a lot of potential for libertarianism. There are a lot of anarchist groups around, with people actively volunteering and doing stuff to help their community instead of moping around waiting for the local councils to do something. And that's something we probably don't often talk enough about, is volunteering and the difference that makes. She also talks briefly about the lockdown, and part of the interview. So the overall lockdown situation is pretty terrifying from a libertarian perspective, though the state has just decided to give itself a huge amount of power. I'm not sure how easy it will be to give it up again, if they ever will at all. So yeah, have a read of that. A great interview there. And if you've got any thoughts on stuff on our website, if you want to write for us, then get in touch.
Absolutely. And you can get in touch via the following methods. We are on the Twitter at CroydonConst. We've got a Facebook page. You can go to our website, croydonconstitutionalists.uk, or you can contact us via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the pubcast and to our YouTube channel. Do please like and share the podcast. Please do leave a review. We always like feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Finally, I'd just like to say thank you once again to everybody for listening. And until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.